Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Gallo. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of Legal Aid Chicago. Welcome to our third session of our series on the emerging legal crisis facing Chicago's Black and Brown communities. Today's session will focus on home foreclosures. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our host today, Jamie Jones, who's a partner at Sidley Austin.
Thanks, John. We at Sidley have been a proud supporter of Legal Aid Chicago's work for more than a decade, and we're so pleased to partner with your organization and sponsor this webinar series focused on the legal issues that are impacting Chicago's most vulnerable communities. Today's program examines the obstacles to those struggling against the threat of foreclosure in the midst of the pandemic. And the lawyers on the front lines of assisting clients to maintain their homes will help us today to understand the challenges their clients are facing and will present opportunities to help. Our panelists will be John Groney, Neighborhood Director of the Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago program, Dan Lindsay, Legal Aid Chicago's Managing Director of Litigation and Consumer Practice, who focuses on foreclosure defense, bankruptcy, and consumer fraud litigation work, and Einat Margalit, Supervising Attorney in the Consumer Practice Group of Legal Aid Chicago, and focusing her practice on home ownership preservation, bankruptcy, and debtors' rights issues. And I'm pleased now to turn it over to John Groney.
So my name is John Groney, and I'm the Neighborhood Director for the West Side Hub of Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago, located here in the Humboldt Park neighborhood. When Dan asked me to give a testimonial as to the value of our partnership, I was very excited. Even in these days of lots of Zoom meetings, I'm very excited to share this valuable partnership. I'm going to read the only slide I'm going to read verbatim is the first one. Our mission here at NHS: to create opportunities for people to live in affordable homes, improve their lives, and strengthen their neighborhoods. So NHS, if you look at the second slide, we're a not-for-profit housing organization. We've been around since 1975. And for the first 20 years of our existence, we really focused on helping low and moderate income families buy their first home or fix up their home on the south and west sides of Chicago. Our lending traditionally was helping people buy and fix, and the lending to help keep people in their homes didn't start until the early 2000s. And of course, the sustaining homeownership through foreclosure, prevention, intervention, and such. And then I think recently in the press, also this advocating for fair lending by our president here at NHS in terms of challenging traditional lenders such as Chase to lend an additional $1 billion on the south and west sides. And building powerful and enduring community partnerships, what that means is we're the boots on the ground, located on the west side of Chicago, the south side of Chicago, and the south suburbs. If we could go to the next screen. So this is a partnership that, this is a partnership in the making over 20 years ago. And once again, NHS focused on two things during our first 20 years, buy and fix. But by the late 1990s, foreclosures began to skyrocket in the neighborhoods we serve, the low and moderate income neighborhoods on the south and west sides of Chicago. And this was in the middle of an economic boom. We started seeing refinances, high-priced, high-interest rate refinances by lenders that we'd never heard of. These were not the traditional banks. In the back of the yards neighborhood where I worked at during this time, you know, we had 331 new foreclosure filings in 1998 and 1999 in a 12 by 12 block area. So this was right in the middle of an economic boom. We were seeing these loans. And so NHS, for the first time, got involved with helping people keep their homes. And we responded to this onslaught of high interest loans with the tools we had, which were affordable refinances. And this is where the partnership with Legal Aid Chicago really began, because by partnering with Legal Aid, we realized that many of these loans were illegal. These were HOPA violations. We didn't know what a HOPA violation was. We just knew we were seeing bad loans that people couldn't afford to pay back. In early 2000, remember, we had 23 cases that Legal Aid Chicago and NHS were working on, and this is very early in the crisis. One of the first settlements that Legal Aid Chicago referred over to NHS for an affordable refinance was a woman who lived in a single-family home on the west side, only owed $10,000 on her home, needed $6,000 to fix up her bathroom, and she ended up with a $32,000 refinance at 11%, with, you know, more than $10,000 in lender fees. And so, if NHS were to just refinance that $32,000, we would have basically cemented the stripping of that equity from the homeowner. And so Legal Aid was able to get a settlement for $16,000, and then we ended up not having to do the refinance because this homeowner never stopped paying that bad mortgage, and she had a 760 credit score. So she ended up refinancing with the bank she had her checking account with, and that was Bank One, which now Chase. So these cross referrals between Legal Aid Chicago and NHS multiplied our effectiveness in the early days of the subprime and predatory lending that hit Chicago. And once again, there was no such thing, if we go to the next screen, there was no such thing as a loan modification. During the early years, the lenders claimed that they couldn't modify the terms of the loans, that the security agreements didn't allow for it. And as that began to change, we would assume that, oh, okay, lenders are offering loss mitigation and loan modifications, so the partnership with Legal Aid Chicago and NHS wasn't needed anymore. It was needed. So because of dual tracking by mortgage servicers were foreclosing on families, while at the same time this dual tracking offering this loan mitigation process, and this was not an easy process to get through. And time again, we needed Legal Aid Chicago as a partner to intervene in these legal proceedings, to give us the time to work out affordable loan mods for NHS clients. And whether it was incompetence or on purpose, a lot of the servicers were skipping steps and, you know, trampling kind of over that legal process. And without Legal Aid Chicago, we were helpless. So once again, cross referrals of NHS clients with Legal Aid Chicago and vice versa multiplied our effectiveness. You know, by 2015, so for 20 years, we measured our impact by new homeowners created. And by 2015, we'd saved 10,423 families from foreclosure using loan modifications, and later on Illinois Hardest Hit Fund grants. But without Legal Aid Chicago, we couldn't have achieved these kinds of numbers. Next screen. So whether it's loan modifications, the rescue fraud that was rampant, you know, in 2008, 9, and 10, before values really dropped, reverse mortgage scams, And also, not to be overlooked is, training by Legal Aid Chicago lawyers for frontline staff of NHS. But we want to talk about kind of the next big thing. So, and once again, I go back to the subprime and predatory loans where they honed their skills, they tried out the high fee, high interest rate refinances in the low and moderate income communities of color before they spread out to the entire country. And so we're seeing the same thing now by insurance companies, and it's called price optimization by the insurance companies. And if you Google that term, you'll see lots of articles on this. And it's not credit-based scoring. It's actually the computer algorithms of the insurance companies saying this family isn't going to comparison shop. They're not as sensitive to price. And so the two examples I have here, these are both families that live on Monticello, just blocks from my office. The first one, a senior who came into my office, his son brought him in saying, I don't think dad can afford the house anymore. He was a month behind on his mortgage already, but we discovered that his insurance premium on his single family home was $5,997 a year. And so we simply assisted him in comparison shopping, and he now pays $1,211 to State Farm, and $1,200 is about the average for a single family home. That's what we want to see. The other example is a couple in their 80s that owned a 2-unit, 1 block further north on Monticello, and they paid off their mortgage, but they were struggling, and we discovered that they're paying nearly $700 a month for their homeowner's insurance on their 2-unit home, and they now pay $153.34 a month to Nationwide. So this is critical because foreclosures, it doesn't matter why you're in foreclosure. It comes down to not having the money to pay all the expenses. And so taxes and insurance matter. The interesting insert about legal aid there is for the family, after they switched out insurance from that $700 a month policy, we were getting threatening letters from the insurer, for a $500 bill for, payment for whatever lapse of insurance there was. And legal aid was there and ready in case they, we were hoping they would try to take it forward, but they didn't. And then lastly, the alternative gas and electric suppliers. In our neighborhood here in Humboldt Park and Austin on the west side, every homeowner reports families or salesmen going door to door, knocking at their doors saying, switch over to our company, we're going to save you money on your gas and electric. Well, what we're seeing is, and we've already documented 49 cases where the alternative supplier was not saving the money, the homeowner money. They were actually charging them, we've seen 2 or 3 times more than the regulated rates. And for years, we weren't aware of this problem. We thought like everybody else, a couple dollars more, a couple dollars less didn't make a difference. Well, we're seeing an average savings of nearly $40 a month after people simply cancel the alternative supplier and go back to the regulated supplier. And then that statistic, that's from the Illinois Commerce Commission. And this is a story that appeared in Crane's Chicago Business back in May of 2019, that the Illinois Commerce Commission is reporting that in each of the last 2 years, Illinois residents have paid $100 million more than what they would have paid to the regulated supplier, which is ComEd. So that's $200 million more. And we really know from experience that they try things out here on the south and west sides. They hone their skills. and they expand it. So this is the latest thing that we're fighting alongside Legal Aid Chicago. And so we have been more effective, and we're grateful that we've had Legal Aid Chicago as one of the tools in our toolkit to help people stay in their home. Yes, we celebrate every time someone buys a home, but helping people stay in their homes and pass that wealth on to the next generation, that's just as important. Dan?
Thank you, John, for that excellent introduction. And obviously, I can say right back to you how invaluable NHS is to our work every day and has been for decades. And for everyone else who's not familiar with NHS, they are really the premier community development organization / housing counseling agency in Cook County. In the past, they've had an office as far away as Elgin, which unfortunately they don't have the funding for anymore, but they really cover the city, and especially, as John said, the south and west sides, better than anybody. So thanks, John. And you'll hear me refer back to like some of our cases with NHS and some of their work as I go through my presentation. Thank you all also for participating and joining us today. We have been doing homeownership preservation work at Legal Aid Chicago for over 20 years, since the mid to late 1990s. So of course, most of that time has been during the run-up to the subprime mortgage crisis, the boom and the bust, and then the fallout after the bust, which really was, years for years. And so, when COVID hit, it was impossible for us not to think about the subprime boom in approximately, or bust in approximately 2008 and everything it meant. And I think there's some clear parallels to that time and lessons to be learned from that time. And three in particular that I'll just sort of throw out as the frame to my comments. Number one is the obvious, clear, racially disparate impact that the subprime crisis had on Black and brown communities across the nation, and certainly in Chicago. That's highlighted in the two articles that we sent ahead, which I hope you'll take a look at if you haven't. And the same is going to be true in COVID. Absolutely. We're already seeing that. We know that. A second thing is that for us to really meet the challenge of the surge, the absolute surge that's going to occur in foreclosures, as there was a surge in the past with the subprime crisis, we're going to need a lot more resources. And, we were fortunate starting in around 2007. I was doing the math the other day, and really for a period of about 12 years, we added about $500,000 in resources and doubled or tripled the size of our homeownership preservation group. And this was through a number of sources, but primarily through the national attorneys general settlements against the big banks. And of course, we know that money coming from those kinds of lawsuits is not going to be there this time. So we're going to be, looking for other ways to try to meet the challenges. The third sort of parallel I see is that so much more of the work coming out of the subprime crisis began to be loan modification work. And John's already touched on this, and I'll talk about this some more. And that is clearly going to be the overwhelming focus of our work in the future as well. So that's the frame. But now let's go back and, just sort of remind ourselves where, the subprime boom and bust came from and how it affected the communities in which so many of our clients live. Well, it was really so much about race discrimination, right? And how was that set up? What was the pretext for that, or the legacy? As many of you know, and again, we talk about this in the article we co-wrote, me and some of my colleagues from NCLC, one of the articles we sent to you. Really, race discrimination in mortgage lending began, unfortunately, through the auspices of the federal government back in the 1930s, when FHA started the whole business of insuring mortgages and really creating a mortgage market, and redlined and wouldn't give loans to people living in Black and brown communities. This set the stage for decades of private redlining. And then, of course, that led to reverse redlining, the term that we often used, in the late 1990s and the 2000s for all the subprime, the bad subprime predatory loans that were coming into Black and brown neighborhoods. And some courts even adopted that term and said, if you're pitching a really bad product and you're focusing on Black and brown communities, that is reverse redlining. So, you know, John used the term testing or something like that, and I thought of the term laboratory as he was talking. You know, one of the things we used to say is capitalism abhors a vacuum, or at least the unregulated, seedy side of capitalism does. So where there was redlining and when there was no credit in neighborhoods, bad subprime came in. And so we started with the ARMs, which by now seem kind of like a quaint and almost conservative product. At the beginning, they were edgy and out there, you know, adjustable rate mortgages. But they really were the benign end of the spectrum. And within 5 to 10 years, you went as far as the ninjas. If you recall, those are the no income, no job or asset loans, meaning brokers could broker loans and not even need to verify income, job, or asset. If you had a pulse, you could get a loan. And by the time ninjas were common, we were really on the edge of the bust for obvious reasons. And, you know, again, the Black and brown communities that we know were the laboratories for these. And subprime, it's estimated, was stripping $9 billion per year from those communities, even before the bust. Homeownership rates were set back 20 years. And in terms of the white-black wealth gap, sadly, it was already bad enough, 12 to 1 before subprime. And at the end of the crisis, it was about twice as bad. It was 20 to 1. And so just, I guess, a comment on my Sisyphus icon there. The idea being that for many years, you know, Black communities were building some wealth and narrowing the wealth gap, but then that all kind of went backwards after the subprime crisis. And of course, you know, we fear and really already seen that that's happening and going to be happening as a result of COVID. So, you know, the other sort of echo with the 2008 and subsequent years, the other echo is sort of the focus on the rise of the regime of loan mods. And in some ways, this is the good news side of it. When the crisis hit, and after 2008, coming out of the Obama administration, the main fix was HAMP, the Home Affordable Mortgage Program, for you know, some millions, not everyone who needed help, but some modest proportion of homeowners who needed help. There was first HAMP 1, where we tried to see if you could get a loan mod by lowering people's mortgages to 30% of their income. And then that kind of shifted to HAMP 2, which has now kind of become the standard ever since and going forward, which basically just says we're going to take the fixed rate and stretch out your payments over 40 years and see if that's affordable. And so we've done a lot of work in this area, and we'll be doing a lot of work in this area. And a lot of it's going to be focused on loan mods. Now, to talk a little bit more about our work overall, I will talk about loan mods first, but that's really only one bucket of our work. We also do a lot of cases that are more purely fraud cases. And then we also have a very active bankruptcy practice. And Inat Margalit, my colleague, is going to talk about some of that work in a few minutes. So with the loan mods, as I said, HAMP 2 sort of generated an industry standard, which now, and even in pre-COVID times, was the Fannie or Freddie Flex Mod. So Fannie or Freddie being 50 or 60% of the market for all of those loans, people in distress can get what's called a Flex Mod. And this is an actual example of one that we were doing really sort of at the beginning and into the beginning of the COVID period. So you have a homeowner who had an original debt of $250,000 at 6%, original income of $5,600. Their payment was $1,800, so you know, quite reasonable and affordable for them, 32% of their income. They had paid it down to $200,000, but then defaulted in April of this year because one of them lost their job. So now their income was cut in half. They owed $207,000. That's the $200 they sort of paid down to, plus now fees, costs, foreclosure, et cetera. The income, as I say, was cut in half to $2,800. So they could never afford to continue to pay that $1,800 original payment, but through a loan mod, a Fannie Mae Flex mod, if you take the current low rate that you can get of 3.25% and amortize it over 40 years, 480 months, you get a payment of $1,100, which is a debt to income ratio of 39%. You know, not small, but certainly manageable. And so this was somebody's home we were able to save because of the Fannie Mae Flex mod. You know, and in general, NHS and other housing counselors do a lot of great work every day getting these kind of loan mods, but as John said, sometimes it gets a little trickier, right? Otherwise said, what could possibly go wrong? So why can't everyone just get a loan mod like that on their own? Well, here are some reasons why, or really these are sort of throwbacks to cases we've dealt with. The first bullet point refers to the fact that we literally had a case which we think must have set the record, where we had to apply 52 times to get a loan mod. At least 52 times we had to send either the full application or a piece of the application or an updated document because the servicer dragged its heels and now said it was outdated, probably over about a 2.5-year period before we could get that loan mod. You also better like spending a lot of time on hold. It can take a good portion of an hour or even over an hour or hours. So during much of our time, we were able to hire extra paralegals. We hope we may be able to do that in the future so that they can really kind of more efficiently focus on a lot of this stuff that's just a lot of detail and keeping track of documents and spending a lot of time talking to people on the phone. Talking to yourself, what do I mean by that? Well, I remember once I was actually calling and on hold and transferred. And right after I was transferred, my other second line, you know, rang, and I thought, oh, I better see who that is. And I hit the button, and it was me. I had been transferred to myself. So as I said to my colleagues, you know, I didn't think quickly enough that day to immediately approve the loan mod that I was asking for, but so be it. The last two bullet points refer in different ways to the repeated need to send documents in a mind-bogglingly inefficient way. Somebody was divorced in one of our cases, and almost every month we had to keep sending the divorce decree. And in the last bullet point, we had a homeowner whose spouse had died. And we had to send the death certificate, I think, 6 times over, as if, you know, they weren't going to stay dead. So that's just a little bit of a taste of what it can be like to work on these loan mods. And in some cases, it is already going wrong now with the CARES Act and with the relief that people are supposed to get. I mean, on paper and in general, at least temporarily, for much of the market, you know, Congress has acted and people have gotten really important relief. So for about 2/3 of the market, federal mortgages, those mortgages which are covered by the CARES Act, which means it's Fannie, Freddie, VA, HUD, or USDA, homeowners who are in distress can ask for and get up to 12 months of forbearance. So that's, you know, a great relief. And that is good. However, we're already seeing that there's some problems with implementation. So the way it's written, the act says you can get 6 months and then a second 6 months. Arbitrarily, it seems, many mortgage companies, mortgage servicers are taking that 6 and 6 and turning it into, you know, 3, 3, 3, and 3. For whatever reason, they've decided they're going to make people ask, you know, every 3 months. So 180 days, you're supposed to automatically get. Instead, they're getting 90 and they have to ask again. The second bullet point is probably even more problematic. The CARES Act is supposed to automatically give relief to any borrower, you know, who's experiencing a hardship due directly or indirectly to COVID. And all they have to do is ask. But instead, there definitely are mortgage servicers who are making people jump through hoops and send in documentations and fill out forms. And that's not supposed to happen. And then finally, the third bullet point refers to the fact that some servicers are telling people once they're 90 or 180, or whatever days are up, you have to pay the whole arrearage at once, immediately. That's false, and it's scaring people, and a lot of people are just you know, failing to follow through because of the fear that, you know, it won't do any good anyways. So we've been able to help with a few of these cases, but I'm sure there are many more out there. And I'm sorry, I think we're going to take Q&A at the end. I see some questions popping up. We look forward to getting to those later. Now, the 2/3 of the mortgages that are covered by the CARES Act, for those, there's a moratorium on any foreclosures through August 31st. And again, you have the 12-month forbearance period. And it's helpful, as I've said, with limitations. But there's the other third of the market for which there are no federal protections. And those homeowners really are just dependent on state and local protections and relief funds. Here in Illinois, the moratoria that have existed have protected people from foreclosure through August 22nd. So that period is now ended. In Cook County specifically, the date for sales, at least foreclosure sales, the end of the case was just the stay on those was just extended to September 21st, a couple days ago. There are also some relief funds which will help some number of people. It's hard to say, you know, how many people those will help. There are local and state funds. To give another shout out to NHS because of their importance in this area. I know they are working with the City of Chicago. They're working with IDA, the Illinois Housing Department Authority, to administer those relief funds. And so I guess as a pitch, if anyone is or knows a homeowner who needs help, they can check the city websites. They can also go to NHS's website. In fact, we have that information as well on our website about the different arrearage programs that currently exist. But those are not going to help everybody. So let me take a step back and talk about all the work we do, because a lot of it's loan mod work, but not all of it. So we kind of have three buckets of work, as I mentioned before. So there's the servicing work I've talked about before, and now I'm sort of segueing to the fraud work that we do, and even that work can be sort of divvied up into different categories. And you know, throughout these past 20 years, and now and going into the future, we'll continue to help people who are defrauded. So one type of fraud would be origination fraud, and John actually referred to a case like this. And in fact, I start off here by talking about this notorious broker, Mark Diamond, who has defrauded and fleeced numerous seniors, specifically on the west side, by tricking them into loans they didn't know they were getting and stripping the equity. And a number of those cases came to us through NHS. A number of those cases we were able to settle and then have NHS do a smaller, fairer rescue loan to help the person keep their home. So so that's been an area where we collaborated a lot, as John spoke, with NHS. And as I mentioned there at the end, even today, we're still defending at least one foreclosure. I have one that Diamond brokered for a gentleman who had no idea what he was getting. He was pitched what he thought was a free government program for seniors, and instead he's died, but now his family, who's lived in the house for decades, is facing losing the home. So we're defending that case. We also do a lot of what I call internecine fraud cases, you know. So unfortunately, where family members or neighbors or trusted loved ones are actually the purveyors of the fraud. So we had a case recently, and again, this was a collaboration with NHS, where two sisters-in-law, that's SIL, lent their names to the client and his wife to buy their home. And everyone understood from the beginning that it was just formal, that client and wife were the ones who made the down payment, who lived in the home, who made all the housing payments, all the mortgage payments for 25 years. At that point, wife died, She had done most of the finances. Husband was getting dementia, fell behind, was confused. At this point, the sisters-in-law, tried to pull a fast one, and they would not help him deal with the lender, so he was not able to try to reinstate. And then, in fact, one day, an appraiser shows up to appraise the home because the sisters-in-law are trying to sell the home, from underneath the client. So we were able to intervene and stay or greatly delay the foreclosure, and then file a separate quiet title case, which the sisters-in-law fought a little bit and then gave up on. And so we got title in the husband's name, and were able to work with NHS, and then they got him a new smaller loan with a lower interest rate to pay off the old debt, and he remains in the home. And literally, John, I think, Groney, whom you heard from earlier, meets with this gentleman every month, just kind of have a check-in and see how he's doing and make sure everything's all right. Oh, I should mention, because I was talking about internecine fraud there, we had another case recently where a daughter defrauded the mother, stole title, stole some $50,000 to $70,000 from her account. And we actually took that case to trial via Zoom. It was a 3-day trial with multiple witnesses and many documents via Zoom. One of our attorneys, two of our attorneys worked on that and completed it and said it was, there were a few bumps, but it was fairly seamless. It went well. We filed post-trial documents and are awaiting a decision and are optimistic in that case. So the third area of fraud, it sort of segues back or ties back a big circle to, all the loan origination craziness, or the loan servicing craziness that I was talking about before, and the dual tracking, to use John's term. So a senior in this case, again, referred by John, owned a 4-unit property. He rented it. He didn't live there, but this was all of his income so that he could pay his own mortgage. And he fell behind. A couple of tenants stopped paying, and there was a period of time where he got new tenants, but he fell behind. And then he started working with the lender to try to get a loan modification. The lender, the mortgage servicer, said, "Sure, send us all your documents." Gave him a deadline. NHS helped this gentleman to do so, and like the day after the documents were sent in, the foreclosure sale went ahead anyways. So John called me, and he sometimes calls me and says, "Dan, get your Superman cape on, go to court for me." And, I usually tell him, sorry, it's too late. But every once in a while, I'm able to tell him, sure. And in this case, I did, and I was able to oppose the confirmation of the sale. And it sounds maybe simple, but it usually means getting multiple documents, affidavits, and really prove up your case, almost like a summary judgment motion. But we were able to stop the sale, and in the end, this client was able to enter into a loan mod and save his home, or save his investment property, which was his income, and therefore save his home. So this is my last slide. I want to just touch very briefly on kind of different area that we also work in, which is tax sale foreclosures. So unfortunately, a lot of folks, usually seniors, have diligently paid their mortgage all these years. They've paid it off, but now they're facing losing their homes because they couldn't pay their taxes, because their taxes were too high. And we are able to save some homes through filing Chapter 13 bankruptcies to pay those taxes off over time. I filed one during COVID, in fact, which is just in its initial stages. But this is a map provided to us by Housing Action Illinois, another very important partner of ours. And it shows, the end of the tax sale foreclosure process, where the tax buyer gets a deed because they may have paid a couple of thousands of dollars of taxes that were outstanding, and now they have a $100,000 house that they've just gotten, a huge windfall, and they're evicting the prior homeowner. And sadly, as you can see, and as is so often the case, the highest concentration, represented by the darker colors here, the darker red, of such evictions over the last 10 years have been on the south and west sides. So we've seen the same, racial disparities again, over and over, And these are our clients that we're trying to help every day when we can. And with that, I am happy to turn things over to my colleague, Einat Margalit.
Thanks so much, Dan. Hello. I have been tasked with discussing the third bucket of Dan's metaphor, bankruptcy, and I will also discuss how we are currently working on expanding that bucket. We don't see bankruptcy as an inevitability for someone who can't pay their debts. Rather, in our hands, bankruptcy is a versatile and holistic multitasking tool that can reorganize our clients' debt and help them save their home. In one filing, you can stop foreclosure, force creditors into a payment plan, and prioritize specific types of debt, including the mortgage. It can also discharge unsecured debt at a very low cost and free up income to be used to pay prioritized debt. In order for bankruptcy to work to save a home from foreclosure, generally, a debtor must have sufficient income to make her ongoing mortgage payments and an additional payment to pay back the arrears on the mortgage over 3 to 5 years. That additional payment is determined by subtracting the debtor's expenses from her income. Unfortunately, given the amount of arrears and our clients' low income, this can make bankruptcy an impossibility for them. There just aren't enough funds. These clients have sufficient income to make an ongoing mortgage payment, but that's it. These clients really need a loan modification so they do not have to pay back the arrears through a payment plan, and they really need a bankruptcy to help deal with other outstanding debt. Many of our clients fall into this category, either because they have a fixed income of Social Security benefits, they have a reduced household income due to family changes, divorce, or death, or because they've been out of work and are just now getting back on their feet. The problem is that the uncertainty of a loan modification, which Dan discussed at length before, doesn't fit how our bankruptcy courts currently approve bankruptcy plans. And as Dan suggested, whether or not a client can get a loan modification can be very uncertain and time-consuming. In bankruptcy, you can't propose a plan with uncertainty regarding the debt owed and ask the court to wait and see what happens while you're waiting on hold with the mortgage company. You can't say, well, this plan will work if I get a loan modification. That if is not allowed, unfortunately. For this reason, and especially given the new exigency created by the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been looking into ways to bridge this uncertainty and make it more compatible with bankruptcy. One solution is a loan modification mediation program, and we are in the process of proposing such a program to our bankruptcy court here in Chicago. For this purpose, we have created a diverse committee comprised of debtors and creditors representatives, a bankruptcy trustee, and judge, and this group is working on such a proposal. It will eventually be submitted to our bankruptcy court for approval. Programs like this have been adopted across the country, and we are hopeful that our local bankruptcy court will also adopt. I added a little PB&J icon to this slide because, as you will see, in a loan modification mediation program, loan modifications and bankruptcy can work better together, just like peanut butter and jelly. The benefits of such a program will combat the difficulties that Dan raised with dealing with mortgage companies when applying for loan modifications, namely communications and accountability. The mediation programs include an online portal to track communications, and all communications must be, and exchanges of documents must be through that portal. And also to enforce compliance and good faith participation through the bankruptcy court, if necessary. So a 52 card pickup, as Dan suggests, would not be tolerated. The biggest benefit is that it creates a program which allows for uncertainty when proposing a bankruptcy plan so that we can help more of our clients. Clients that we previously had to say no to and who possibly lost their homes. In any case, our macro view of how mortgage foreclosure plays out in Cook County, given our macro view of how mortgage foreclosure plays out in Cook County, we are always striving to create bigger and better buckets to help our clients. So thanks so much for listening. I will now introduce Melissa Picciola, who is our Director of Volunteer Services.
Thank you, Anat. As we face an emerging legal crisis, I am grateful for the work of you, Dan, the entire consumer practice group, and NHS. Your creativity and tenacity are inspiring. I want to talk briefly about some of the opportunities for all of you to get involved in Legal Aid Chicago's work. At Legal Aid Chicago, we have over 20 different volunteer opportunities. Our volunteers work alongside us to help meet the needs of our clients and are essential to helping us achieve our mission of bringing about justice for all. And you can see here the impact that our volunteers made just last year. We have a variety of opportunities available, offering everything from a commitment of a couple hours at a help desk to a longer term representation. And many of our opportunities are now fully remote. One opportunity that can help preserve home ownership through generations is our ADAPT program, in which you can help by preparing powers of attorney, living wills, and transfer on death instruments, which will allow transfer of ownership of a home without the necessity of a will or probate process. This is a purely transactional opportunity and fully remote at this time. You can help in this way by preparing those documents for the client, and typically the time commitment is 3 to 4 hours per case. The Bankruptcy Help Desk, which is physically located in the Dirksen Federal Courthouse, has gone fully remote and is a brief service and shift-based opportunity. For any of you on the other side of my screen who like bankruptcy as much as Anat and Dan, it's a great opportunity to help clients through this process and make a real difference. And I should say, I don't think anyone likes bankruptcy as much as Dan or Anat, so that's not required to volunteer at the Bankruptcy Help Desk. Just an enthusiasm for helping people through that process. And again, this is an opportunity that's now fully remote, and still we're receiving a lot of demand for this service. So if you're interested and you're available, I encourage you to sign up. And so you can find out more information about all of our volunteer opportunities on our website, and you are welcome to reach out to me with any questions that you may have about any of our opportunities and how you might be able to help. And so I'll turn it back over to John Gallo.
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks to John, Dan, and Anat for their fantastic presentations. I have to say that I learned a lot during those presentations, even though I've been at Legal Aid Chicago for 3 years. I now understand some of the things that Dan and Anat have been saying to me for the last 3 years, so it was educational for me as well. That concludes our planned content portion of the presentation, and in a moment we'll start the Q&A portion. So all of you who've, I've been reading the questions and some of the great questions that have been posted, we're going to take all those questions momentarily. Before we do, I'd like to give a plug for our Relay for Justice, which starts next Monday. It's free to join. So let me start again. It's free to join as we collectively log our miles by walking, running, and biking or swimming to travel together across the country with stops that mark vital moments in our country's civil rights and civil justice history. So just go to our website at Legal Aid Chicago, just Google us and go to our website, and it pops right up and it takes you right to the link. And again, it is free. And there's no expectation of anything other than just participating. The panelists are gonna remain on to answer your questions. So I know we've seen questions coming in, and so Dan, would you just take over from here and lead the team through the Q&A?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. There were some good questions. One question was, have the CFPB's RESPA servicing rules improved servicing customer service? Which parts are working best? SPOC, notices, anti-dual tracking. So for the uninitiated, that's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which promulgated rules that went into effect in 2014 under RESPA, the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. And this was really the set of rules that focused on, among other things, fighting dual tracking. One of the problems that John Groney and I both talked about, in our presentations. And then this question is asking, has that helped? Has it improved? And have other RESPA rules brought about improvements? For instance, with the SPOC, that stands for the single point of contact. We always joked, all that meant was that every time you called, you'd only talk to one single point of contact. And it was literally almost often kind of true. You'd get a different person every week. So it was kind of meaningless. I would say, I answered in the chat, I think that dual tracking has improved, or I should say has been reduced to a certain extent by the rules. I think that, like we saw in foreclosure court after the rules came in, and also a state judicial rule 114, back about the same time. When those came in, the lenders were much quicker to withdraw a motion for summary judgment, say, if there was a pending loss, a pending loan modification packet. They understood that at least, whether their client did it correctly or not, they needed to fully review and respond to and either accept or deny the loan mod app before they could move forward and get judgment or get sale. So I think that has improved. It's not perfect. The single point of contact, I think, is still not great. Notices, maybe a little. I think there's better acknowledgement of notices. So notices are, many times we will send notices to servicers that are called a notice of error if we want to contest something with the account, or a request for information if we just don't understand something about the account and want to get information. And I think servicers are better about acknowledging those and responding on time. Does it mean they really respond immediately? I mean, meaningfully? Does it mean they really respond meaningfully and fix problems? So-so. That's what I would say about those things. So somebody asked, are there financial resources that landlords can apply for regarding my reference to the relief programs, for tenants and for homeowners. So, I mean, the good news is that it's win-win if you have a tenant who applies for relief and gets it, because the money is going to go straight to the landlord under the City of Chicago and State of Illinois programs. So I think that, over on our housing side where we represent tenants, we're really trying to get the word out and help encourage landlords to be patient and work with their tenants and hopefully see if their tenants can get financial assistance, which, will help both the landlord and the tenant.
Dan?
Yes.
But I was just going to say that also, if the landlord has a mortgage that is a government insured mortgage, they can ask themselves for forbearance.
Correct.
So that
Exactly.
would be a big help to a landlord that is not getting rent at this time.
Absolutely. Here's a great question. When you sue a company for fraud, do you also sue a natural person involved in the fraud, such as Mark Diamond? Any success with that? And I did respond, it's really case by case. In the old days when we had a lot of fraud cases, we would often sue the third party defendant and bring in the individuals. But for instance, in the case I have now, we really didn't even think twice about suing Diamond himself. If we had, we would have been in line behind, other victims, creditors, and lien holders owed millions of dollars by Diamond. So it would have been pointless and hard to believe he has much of anything left. And he himself specifically is basically indicted and awaiting federal prosecution. So it is case by case. So sometimes we have been able to get something. Let's see. Under the CARES Act, why not just extend the amortization period by the numbers of months that payment was delayed? So we will, in the coming months, be becoming experts on all the different iterations of CARES Act relief, depending on what kind of mortgage you have when the forbearance is over. there's a different specific type of loss mitigation that's required that the servicer go through, and so it depends. And we're going to be working, I'm sure, with a lot of homeowners who are having problems getting the servicers to understand and apply the formulas correctly. But in many cases, it does include extending the amortization period, either by the period of time that payments weren't made, or simply recasting the loan entirely. So it would depend. It would depend on which program it was. Let me see if there are any others. There's a couple different tabs I have to go back and forth through. Okay. John, this is sort of for you, if you know, John Groney. Has anyone sued the insurance or the utility companies for the, oh, I hear music.
Perhaps you're being played off the stage, Dan. Who knows?
I guess. It's nice. Very soothing.
It's not terrible.
Oh, I guess that was John because he muted himself and the music went away. I don't know if John's going to be able to answer this without the music or not. Maybe he can type in the Q&A box. But someone's asking if anyone has sued the insurance or the utility companies for fraud or for gouging related to the kind of practices that you were talking about before, John Groney. Myself, I'm not aware if that's happened, at least in the Chicago area yet. Do you know, John, of any activity of that kind? He may be typing. Looks like he might be typing, so we'll wait. So someone else had another question about the relief funds, asking if I could give maybe more details on the IDA money, the state money, able to support people at risk of foreclosure, up to 5,000. How does that work, and what are the implications? So I think it's actually 15,000. It might be 5,000 for renters, but I think it's up to 15,000 for homeowners. Justin? I think Justin wanted to interject something.
I think you can continue, Dan. I think he was prompting you to answer the question.
Okay. Great question here. How does the COVID-induced foreclosure crisis compare to the subprime crisis so far? You know, it's interesting. We think a lot about this. As I said at the very beginning, we see parallels, but there are obviously some differences as well. I think that, the first crisis was completely man-made, right? And in some ways that made it feel worse. In some ways, it was better in the sense that we did have all of the lawsuits against the big banks and the big servicers and others, for their violations of law during that time. And a lot of settlement money came out of that funded legal aid around the country. So that was the silver lining. That, we're not going to see here. Are we going to see additional resources to help homeowners, coming from the federal government? I mean, there's as anyone's aware of, I'm sure, a lot of discussion and debate and maybe, and who knows, between the parties in Washington. So far, it's just been really the relief money, which is only going to help a small percentage of people. So in that sense, it may be more challenging. I do think, again, of the loan mod regimes that came out of the subprime crisis, again, that's sort of a silver lining in the sense that at least this time, that regime is kind of already there. And I think the servicers will be hopefully somewhat better this time around, about applying and implementing those loan mod applications and processes to help more people stay in their home. But there's no doubt about it. There's millions and millions of people at risk of losing their home. So it's another huge, large scale problem. All right. So Justin's saying I'm supposed to hit answer live. I hope you heard my response. Did you hear my response, Melissa?
Everything's going great, Dan. You can keep moving through the questions.
Okay. Where do most of your referrals come from? Great question. A lot come from people who are sued in court. A lot come from our valued partners and collaborators like neighborhood housing services, government partners and offices, other legal aid organizations, and word of mouth, and people checking out, I guess, our website and social media. So it's really quite a hodgepodge, I guess I would say.
Dan, there's a question there about court process, which I hope you would answer, which is the length of the mortgage foreclosure process in Cook County courts likely to increase as a result of the pandemic? And I think the question is referring to, has there been delays in getting court dates?
So that's a great question. So first of all, the foreclosure court processes have been stayed, as they have been with a lot of other court processes, really during the last 4 months. They now are moving forward. All those I mentioned earlier are stayed still through September 21st. So there's definitely going to be, I think a minimum of 4 to 6 months delays on cases that were either filed or were kind of waiting in the queue to be filed. In addition, I think that, well, for anybody, of course, who's in forbearance, they shouldn't be proceeding through foreclosure. So there should be that delay. And then for people who aren't entitled to forbearance, or maybe at the end of the forbearance period, and then the foreclosure starts to move forward, again, hopefully they'll be applying for loan modification. And, assuming they're not like somebody with zero income, if they at least have the chance, then hopefully that will slow things down while the servicers consider their application. And there's also talk, I should add, that the Cook County Foreclosure Mediation Program, which existed until a few years ago, may well be reinstated. And that will be another way where homeowners can ask for mediation if they want help kind of slowing down the foreclosure process, help getting a loan mod considered by their servicer, where that seems to be problematic. So I don't know if John Groney ever was able to get back on.
Do I have my audio back?
You
do. And no music. So do you know of any lawsuits or other things or action that's going on around these problems that you talked about with the insurance or the utility rates?
I do not. What we're doing is, simply, we call it financial self-defense for homeowners, and especially senior homeowners, where we're trying to, let people know that the average cost of insurance is $1,200 for a single family and, $1,800 for a 2-unit. And train people to know that, we're the only ones that look after our money. In terms of whether or not what they're doing is illegal, I don't know. It's shocking, but I'm not aware of any lawsuits.
Right, and I'm not either. We have spoken with the AG, because there's another question in here about, is the AG looking into the energy source gouging? I can't really speak to that, but I have spoken with someone at the AG's office about the insurance rate problem, and I think it's on the radar screen. I think they're concerned too, and don't know to what extent they may be investigating any particular providers. But John, you could also certainly have individual customers who are gouged, file complaints with the AG, because of course the way they work over there is, if they get enough complaints focused on one provider, then they're going to start to really focus their energy and their attention on that provider.
Yeah. So the current AG late last year passed pass a law that basically makes, on any ComEd bill, they actually have to show the regulated rate each and every month. So if you do have an alternative supplier, you could at least compare those rates. But while they're concentrating on the electric, I think the gas alternative suppliers realized that they used to put whatever the rate they were charging clients on the bills. Well, they don't even show the rates. So we have to divide the charge by the number of therms they use just to tell people that they're being charged, 43 cents a therm when the regulated rate is 20.
Great, thanks. Here's an interesting question. Should homeowners purchase monitor service to protect them from title fraud? So I don't know necessarily that's advised or required, but it reminds me, years ago, during the 2000s, really, it was more common. Title fraud was more common because of, all the terrible subprime lenders that you could easily get a mortgage with. So people would steal title and, get the easy mortgage and steal the home, strip equity. We were part of a task force back then, and the Cook County Recorder of Deeds, as a result of that time and that work, adopted a new strategy where basically any time that a deed is filed on one's property, a postcard goes out to alert the homeowner. And of course, that's intended to try to help you catch this stuff if it happens, catch it quickly. And honestly, the other thing I would say to that is, we advise homeowners to do what I do, which is to check my title from time to time, kind of like checking my credit report, to make sure that I don't see anything amiss, just for another layer of protection. Are the resources available? Resources mentioned available to holders of a reverse mortgage. So I guess we'd be talking here about, well, forbearances. So that's one. And under the CARES Act, it's maybe ambiguous, but there's nothing that says it isn't available. So if you were under reverse mortgage, you don't have to pay a monthly principal and interest payment as you do with a traditional forward mortgage, because it's just based on the equity in the home for seniors. But under a reverse mortgage, you still have to pay your taxes and insurance. Getting back to John's point about taxes and insurance can still lead to foreclosure. The forbearance is arguably available, and it sounds like people have been getting it if you're, say, behind on your taxes and insurance and you're facing potential foreclosure on a reverse mortgage if you're a senior. So you should reach out to your servicer and ask for forbearance. As far as, can you get money from the city or state funds? I'm really not sure. I think you'd have to check, the specific requirements and whether or not those apply to reverse mortgages. And again, if they did, it would only be for taxes and insurance. It wouldn't be payments to the mortgage company. So you'd have to look. Those may not be available. It's going to depend on the details of the program. Can you give an example of how one is indirectly affected by COVID that would be covered by CARES? I think the good news is, I'll give you the butterfly effect example. It really can be, a second or third level effect. So not, I lost my job, like the example I gave was, one of the married couple lost their job. And obviously that's a direct effect. But I think if, children maybe who are remote learning, they can't go to school, and so they need more help. And so one of the parents' hours, are reduced, or, increased expenses even for taking care of somebody else who's affected by COVID. Really anything like that. So we really are encouraging homeowners to reach out to their servicers if there's anything that's affecting them, even if it's not directly their job.
I think also the CARES Act is written in a way where it says pretty basically, based on the borrower's statement, that it's a COVID-related default, and they're not allowed to ask for any substantiation of that statement. So
They're supposed to just honor the request, right?
Yeah.
Good follow-up question. What prevents a lender from demanding the entire balance due after the CARES Act moratorium expires? So again, I think I mentioned the different mortgages, depending on what the mortgage is, you know, there are different sort of protocols in place for what sort of repayment plan or loan modification has to be offered by the servicer. And none of them require, you know, immediate repayment. So again, this is for the 2/3 covered by the CARES Act. You know, it's more up in the air for the 1/3 that are not. But at least if it's covered by the CARES Act, you know, you are supposed to basically get the options of something like a repayment plan or a loan modification.
Yeah, I think we're definitely nervous about the 1/3 that aren't covered, and whether or not there's going to be, you know, full, you know, that lenders will be expecting full loan modification packets, you know, after the 6 or 12 months. Hopefully that's not the case.
So here's another homeowner's insurance rate question. John, if you want to tackle it, it says, aren't homeowners insurance rates based on claims in their neighborhood?
So, you know, when we first found a homeowner paying $6,000 a year, immediately I even had colleagues that says, well, you know, they probably made a lot of claims, have bad credit, you know, are scamming the system. And so we said, well, let's see, let's comparison shop with 2 or 3 other companies, same amount of insurance, and see what we get. And if they all come back 6,000, I guess that's our answer. But they came back at 1,200. And so that's our objection to price optimization, because it has nothing to do with credit history. It has nothing to do with claim history, whether it, you know, I mean, claim free is 3 years without a claim in the insurance industry, or 5 years after a fire. So if they're claim free, have good credit, but that doesn't make a difference if they're paying 6,000. So really it is by comparison shopping, and surprisingly, even a lot of housing activists immediately jump to, well, they must be doing it for a reason. There must be problems with the house. There must be, and so comparison shopping gives us our answer. It's a marketplace, and reputable companies like State Farm says, no, I'll insure you for $1,200.
That's a great answer, John. And you reminded me, I can't help but think of, there was an excellent pair of articles in the New York Times a day or two ago, both on race discrimination and the effects of it in African-American communities. And one of them was about appraisals. And so they featured 2 or 3 different Black homeowners who had appraisals done, and they really felt like the appraisal was unfairly low. And so they actually went, took the steps of the phrase that was used in the Times, I believe, was like, removed all signs of Blackness from their house, and maybe had like a neighbor or a relative who was white, you know, do the appraisal the second time. And it was just shocking. The appraisals went up like 25 to 40% in each case. Just very, very powerful stuff. Last question I have here is, what kind of advocacy on behalf of the 1/3 who are uncovered? Well, I mean, I think the partial good news is that by now, and coming out of the last crisis, you know, a lot of servicers and owners of loans have realized that loan mods, whenever you can get them done, really are better. It's win-win-win, you know, for borrower, for lender, for community. And so I think that most of the 1/3 who aren't covered there's still going to be some kind of loan mod process. It'll probably be what's called a proprietary loan mod process, just in-house with that servicer. But many of them are kind of similar. They're kind of a legacy of HAMP 2 and the Fannie Freddie Flex mod. So I think housing counselors like NHS and legal aid will be fighting, to try to get people loan mods. And then, as Not mentioned briefly, we also filed Chapter 13s for homeowners who we think can catch up on their mortgages and remain in their homes if they're just given a 3 to 5 year period to do so. But I think there's no questions left, so I'm supposed to turn it back over to someone.
I think that might be me, bud. So I shifted positions and take my coat off, so I apologize for the informal nature of my attire right now. So thanks to all of you guys for attending. I think another very successful presentation. We hope you'll join us 1 week from today for our presentation on workers' rights, which will be led by our Immigration and Workers' Rights Practice Group. We're grateful to all of you who participated and to all the law firms and companies who are sponsoring this series. I'm so thankful to my team for this presentation and to John for his partnership with us for 20 plus years. Signing off from our respective Zoom locations. Thanks, everyone.